Bismillah, wassalatu wassalamu ala rasulillah. So, there are some parables or analogies or similtudes that I can mention to, in a easy sort of way, make you understand what a marriage entails and what it will require and what will be required from a functioning marriage. Okay. So I have 3 such similitudes to make. The first one is a car. There is actually a surprising amount of similarities between a woman and a car. And buying a car is essentially, from certain aspects, very similar to marrying a woman. You might laugh at that, but I believe that you will agree that some parts of this similitude or this similarity is actually beneficial to consider. So, for example, with regards to a man and a car, the mentality of the man also comes into play. Some men actually, they want to switch cars all the time, which is obviously a waste and it's not good, from an Islamic standpoint, but some men function like this. Some men want several cars. Some men only feel that, some men feel that having a car is a hassle, is a necessity, and they do not by any means want anything to do with more than one car. Some men care about an engine. The engine should be very strong. Some men care about the number of seats. Some care about the outside of the car, the color, the make, the how it looks, the appearance of it, but don't really care about the engine. Some men have the mentality that a car doesn't matter how it looks. Actually, it just needs to function. It needs to take you from A to B. Some men like to splurge on their cars. Well, they see a point, and there is kind of a purpose in itself with putting in a lot of money for your car. It contributes to your self-worth of some sort. And some men see it as an insult to be investing or putting in a lot of money for a car. And some men are balanced in this aspect. So when buying a car, you actually need, in a way, when you're gonna buy a car, you need to, even though this may go against some people's mentality, you need to not look at the car before buying it, let's say. Well, if I put it this way, when seeing the car, if you're like dazzled, amazed by the appearance of the car, then you will not actually care about the hard facts. For example, did it go what about the mileage of the car? Has it ran too long? Then it might not even be worth looking at the car, because it might look great. It might have just gotten a new paint job, for example. That will totally dazzle you. It might have these, this in-car entertainment system, and so on and so forth. But it doesn't matter if the car won't start, right? So, in a way, you should look at the hard facts before getting into the emotional aspect, because the emotional aspect is not something that you can build. It's not something that will, help you if the hard facts don't add up. Know what I mean? So, when buying a car, you need to look at the hard facts first. What's the mileage? Has it had any, serious incidents in its history? Has there been, engine swaps? Is there ever a problem starting the car? Have you, the current owner, have you ever had any problems starting this car? Ever? Has it ever happened? So basically, you need take a rational look at the car before a visual look. Because once you get a look at the car, you will basically almost decide immediately if you want it or not. Like, I gotta have this car, even though it won't even start. You won't even be able to take it from the point of sale. And you might even be setting yourself up for a lifetime of trouble every day. Every trip you take might be set up for disaster. There's always fuss with the engine, always fuss with the steering, with the servo, with the gearbox, and so on and so forth. So first off, you should be deciding, like, facts based. Is this a car, not that I want, because you might want something that is not good for you. Is this a car that one should be buying? Should one buy this car? Is it a buyable car? Is it an ownable car? If it's not, then you shouldn't even take a look at it, right? So that's one similitude. A woman is like, or marrying a woman is like buying a car. And it's also, to a large extent, this is actually, it goes both ways, so it goes for a woman as well. So, the second similitude is that marrying a woman is like getting a job. It's sort of like, you almost say that getting a job is like getting married, and well, I guess that's true as well, but what we're talking about here is the opposite similarity, so that marriage, in a sense, is like employment. It should be done by contract. It should be done, you shouldn't, like, as you say, like, work black, like you work without a contract, you don't pay taxes, you don't do, everything is done unofficially, under the table. That opens up for a host of different problems. Basically, if something happens, if some kind of conflict happens or a situation occurs, then you won't be able to seek help and get your right as easily. He didn't pay your, the employer didn't pay your salary, or he gave you too little. Well, officially you don't even work here, so your hands are tied, So in a way, it's very much like getting an employment. For example, it's the same thing here. Rationality versus emotionality. So when you employ someone, you really need to, it is a requirement that the worker, should be socially agreeable, right? It's a necessity. But the agreeability of a person can be blinding. If you are dazzled by the person, then there is a risk that you might overlook his other shortcomings. And That's why it's a risk to even meet the person before you have vetted and done the initial weeding of candidates. For example, this guy might be, I'm not saying that's a problem in real life, but for example, if the guy is a convict, he's on probation for some serious crime, you might not want to get into a relationship with that person. I mean, work-wise, right? Could that person really be trusted? Can he be trusted not to fall back into his old habits? And the same thing applies as with buying a car, right? So you need to look at the hard facts. What's the age? What's the experience? What's the work experience? What's the education of the person? What are the skill sets that the person claims to have? Which is also valuable. It's also valuable information, even though it's just a claim. It's an empty claim, as a matter of fact, because there's no way to know and to verify that just by that paper, just by the application. But it's good. All information is good. All input is good. So you need to look at those hard facts, or the claims, I should say, because even a CV or a job application is actually just empty words. It might not be accurate. It might not be a lie, outright, but it might not be accurate information. There might be errors in there. It might have been that he worked 3 years and not 1 year at McDonald's, for example. Is that relevant? It could be. I remember an applicant or a guy who wanted to work at a company I was working, actually. So he had lots of relevant experience. He had worked with, systems and developing stuff and so on and so forth in another country. But then it's said in the application that he had actually worked. He'd come to this country and he had worked. I mean, I live in the West, so there's obviously bad jobs. So he had worked as a bartender here for 3 years. I mean, that needs to be taken into consideration. He might be a very good worker in that other field, but if that's the case, then something is off. You need to investigate. Might be a bad example, and inshallah you will not encounter such a situation. But I mean, really, to be honest, I didn't actually. I looked at that guy's application. I didn't react on that, and my boss did so. He said, come on, this guy's a developer, and he works as a bartender for 3 years. That's not just possible. I didn't actually notice this. So you need to have a keen eye, a really keen eye, and a kind of fingertip feeling for this. It is, in fact, partly intuition. So check out the application, and then basically what you're looking for, first off, is deal breakers. Okay, I cannot work with a guy like this. Okay, some things may be dubious, and deal breakers if it's true. So just note them down, and if you're meeting with the person, check. It might be that something seems off, but you're not really sure if it is. And right now it's not certain enough to pass on. So you go to the meeting and you mention it, and you can actually then also have a keen eye and mention it, perhaps even mention it in a certain way as to get a reaction from the person, and be observant of the reaction. So if you get a bad feeling, then you will obviously probably not go forward. Another thing speaking about the employee thing, the person needs to be agreeable. So that's what you get from the meeting, along with other things, verifying information and so on and so forth. So the person actually doesn't need to be that agreeable. It just needs to be agreeable enough, right? It is a tense situation, tense moment after all. So, if everything looks good and the meaning is good enough, then it may be worth pursuing, I think that's it for the second similitude. The third one is actually that a marriage is sort of like having a roommate. In your university or whatever, if you have a roommate, you have to consider that the roommate doesn't have to be an amazing person. The roommate doesn't have to have any sort of special value or be any sort of special person in him or herself. So in other words, the roommate doesn't have to be good. He just has to be not bad. Okay? So, or rather good enough. Doesn't have to be good, but good enough. And I mean by that, really, that the roommate doesn't the roommate doesn't have to be, it wouldn't make sense for you to make an application, make an advert for looking for roommates and go like, okay, I want a roommate who is interested in science. I want a roommate that I can converse with in late nights. I want a roommate who can help me out with my homework. I want a roommate, that knows how to fix cars, for example. No. A roommate, that's not the purpose of a roommate. That would be great if that person is that. But it shouldn't be a stopper if he isn't, You're actually looking for someone, because a roommate, sure, it's temporal, it's not forever. Contrary to the marriage, right? But the roommate, it needs to be sustainable. You will, by definition, share your life with this person, So the person needs to have, all the bad things you can think of in a roommate, the deal breakers, so to speak, needs to not be there. So, for example, the roommate needs to be mindful of when you're to be, not disturbed or whatever. Needs to be not, needs to be somewhat empathic. Not keep you awake if you have work next day. Not, make a mess in the home and not pick up after yourself. Not, for example, walk in with shoes if you got muddy shoes or whatever, these kinds of things. If your roommate doesn't do any of that, then basically you should be good. You should be good. So it's just like, as a roommate, you need to not do anything stupid, which is especially important in all these similitudes, really. Not do anything stupid, especially in the first period. And in the case of the car, this means that, if the car breaks down first day, then your trust in the car will be shook, and that will actually leave traces on the everyday interacting with this car from now on. So if you are, actually this goes both ways, if you are kind of weird, you say kind of weird stuff, for example, stupid comments, that might happen in both the case of males and females, you know. Then especially don't do it the first month or months in your marriage, you know, because it's got to do with the first impression. That's the case with the job as well. You can't start out by, you know, taking a 15-minute coffee break out of the blue. No, you need to build up that trust account in order to later be able to, you know, withdraw from it. There is a buffer. And what's more, by the way, you should have, I mean, even if you're buying a car and it's really expensive, then even then it is kind of important to check out the references. And in the case of the car, this means the ownership history. If you're buying, for example, a very expensive car like $200,000-$300,000 and it has like 3 owners, you know, to be honest, it's worth looking up these people and calling them up and saying, did you have any problem with this car? Why did you know? And I'm not saying that what you should do if the person is divorced, no, but I'm saying look up the references. And alhamdulillah, you know, in Islam there is no ghiba, there is no backbiting for the person who is going to be married. So you can, and in fact you should, mention their flaws